My name is Jackie Malton. I was a detective with the Metropolitan Police for over 25 years. My real-life experiences on the front line as a woman investigating crime became the inspiration for the TV drama Prime Suspect. Oh, good morning, Pete. My name's Jackie Malton. Once a detective, always a detective. It never leaves. And now I'm going back on the road, on the job, and I'm looking at some of the worst crimes ever committed in the UK and the USA. In a series of exclusive interviews, I'll be talking one-to-one to detectives and experts to find out how they brought the killer to justice. This is the story of what it takes to find the real prime suspect. When I joined the police back in the 1970s, there was one police investigation that really gripped the nation. It involved the brutal kidnapping and murder of a 17-year-old girl called Leslie Whittle by a man called Donald Neilson. What everybody remembers, it involves the kidnap and death of Leslie Whittle, a young 17-year-old heiress who had inherited some money off the death of her father. She was taken in the middle of the night from her own warm bed and taken to a tunnel. She was naked. She was tied up with wire, a bit like a hot cross bun, where she was bandaged across the head, down the nose and around the neck. She remained on a very, very narrow 2-foot platform, naked, cold, no food, no hot drink, must have been scared, absolutely witless, and she subsequently was murdered. But the kidnap and murder of Leslie Whittle was the culmination of Neilson's heinous criminal life. For almost a decade, he orchestrated a reign of terror as an armed robber. Dressed all in black, the press dubbed him the Black Panther. Whenever he was challenged, he killed without mercy. I've managed to track down Peter Toghill, who, whilst on his beat, walked into one of Neilson's murder scenes.
Hello.
Oh, good morning, Pete. My name's Jackie Malton, investigating the case of Leslie Whittle.
Yep.
I understand that you were a uniformed police officer, visited the post office master, Sid and Peggy, and on this particular morning, unfortunately found Sid dead. Can you tell me what happened that evening?
I was called out straight away to deal with the theft of a vehicle. After taking details of the car, I saw a light on in the post office and went to investigate.
A light on at the post office, after 10 o'clock at night, very unusual. Did you know the postmaster?
I knew Mr. and Mrs. Grayland quite well, yes.
So you see a light on, get out the car and investigate what happened, Pete.
I could see that there was money on the counter, but there was no sign of Mr. and Mrs. Grayland. So I went to the back door, which was ajar, tried to push it open and could see Mr. Grayland on the floor. Felt for a pulse, there was none. So realising he was dead, went into the back of the building, and at that point heard somebody counting, going 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, then back to 10, just counting from 10 to 50. Could see a pile of boxes in the corner with a hat stand. These were moved, and Mrs. Grayland was there with severe injuries to her head.
Was Mrs. Grayland able to talk to you?
No, not at all. She was just counting over and over again. Sid had opened the door, and there was obviously a bang. And Sid fell to the floor. And then he came in, and she said she tried to stop him.
What did you learn from all of the evidence that happened that night at Langley Post Office?
He obviously had cased the joint and used the canal to travel all the way to Dudley, where he left the car.
He was military background.
Military trained, yes.
So here was a man who did lots and lots of research before he committed the offence.
I believe so, yes. Yes, he was a very clever man. There's no doubt about that.
Did Mrs. Graynon ever speak to you about the impact on her life of the evening that Neilson killed her husband and severely injured her?
Only to say that the injuries that she received were still painful.
This is the case of Donald Neilson, known as the Black Panther, one of the most evil men in the history of British crime. Donald Neilson, in the guise of his alter ego, the Black Panther, would commit over 400 burglaries, and as the violence of his crimes escalated to murder, he would leave a trail of devastation in his wake. He was always on the lookout for the next bigger and bolder opportunity. This came when he saw a story printed in a local newspaper. It told of how a teenager called Leslie Whittle had inherited a small fortune. This information would soon distill into a deadly plan. 17-year-old Leslie was the daughter of George Whittle, who ran a successful coach company. It was widely publicised that the young woman was set to inherit the sum of £82,000, around £500,000 in today's money. Just weeks after the publication of the story, Neilson struck. He broke into the Whittle family home. He abducted Leslie. As morning broke, Leslie's mother and her brother Ron discovered that she was missing. But it would be some hours before they realised she had been kidnapped. They were only alerted to this when Mrs. Whittle found a ransom note printed on a strip of dino tape left in a box of chocolates. The kidnapper was demanding £50,000 for her safe return. The note came with a warning to the family to keep the police out of it, but they called the police right away, and it wasn't long before the story leaked to the press, with what would prove to be devastating consequences. Kidnapping was a crime that the police in the region had no experience of dealing with, and the feeding frenzy by the press meant their hopes of an undercover operation had been blown from the outset. There are investigations where I think, the media have just not been, been interfering to the detriment of the investigation. I've managed to track down Andy Wright, who was one of the first journalists to break the story. I'm interested to find out how the story first broke in the news. Kidnap was always this total kind of blackout of news. So where do you think that call came from?
I'm pretty sure it must have emanated from the police originally, but the call to our news desk actually came from a freelance. I'm pretty sure he was tipped off.
Did the police say to you to keep away from this incident?
No, they didn't keep us away from the actual house. They did at times ask us to not follow vehicles, and presumably that's when they were doing ransom runs and so on.
Did you follow the vehicles?
I did on one occasion, yeah. But my car wouldn't have kept up with Ron's car anyway. He got a Reliant Scimitar.
Did you not ever think that the press interference could lead to...
It endangered Leslie's life? I honestly didn't think that at the time, possibly with hindsight, but Certainly not at the time. I felt it was my duty to find as much as I could and publicise that.
And presumably the kidnapper would be reading your publications, though.
I'm not sure. We honestly didn't know where he was from, whether he was local or from farther away. There were all kinds of theories. But whether he would read it or not, certainly the national papers were reading what we wrote locally and picking up on it, so broadcasting it in a wider area, yes.
But if a kidnap happened today, there would be no such interference with the press, would there?
I think they've learnt a lot of lessons from it, yeah. I think they would impose a news blackout, and I think that we would adhere to that blackout.
By now, the family were in possession of the cassette recording which Neilson had forced Leslie to make. It contained instructions about how the ransom money was to be delivered. Leslie's brother, Ron Whittle, became the bagman for the ransom drop, withdrawing £50,000 in cash from the bank. Ron was told to go some 60 miles from the village of Highley, where the Whittles lived, to the village of Kidsgrove in Staffordshire. There he would find a telephone box where he was to take a call at 10 p.m. John Chawner was a detective who worked on the case at the time. Hi, John. Jackie Malton here. I'm looking into the details of the kidnap and murder of Leslie Whittle. In particular, what happened the night of the ransom drop.
Hello, Jackie. It was a very long time ago, but I'll tell you what I remember of it. It was a particularly nasty murder committed by an evil man.
The instructions from this evil man who committed these crimes, I mean, to put them on a demo tape and expect people to travel 60-odd miles to an area they don't know and carry out certain things in certain times, it wasn't good. So things started to go wrong then. When Ronald Whittle finally found himself in Kidsgrove to the phone box, he was very late and then spent some time trying to find this demo tape that Neilson had put there. I mean, this is horrible. This is a horrible thing to do. I mean, whatever state he must have been in. And, of course, he was then instructed to go to Bathpool Park, just a mile or so down the road here. I mean, he didn't know where he was.
Covering over 170 acres of woodland, the park was a warren of pathways and trails. Arriving at the park, Ron desperately tried to find his way by torchlight.
Whittle was told to go to the Bathpool Park and look for a flashing light. Well, of course, this courting couple saw this flashlight and really didn't take much notice of it. And, of course, Neilson, although it was late at night, he didn't account for ordinary people going about doing things that they do, coming along and interrupting things.
Lost, disorientated, Ron Whittle cried out his name in the dark, hoping for the kidnapper to respond and tell him what to do with the money. But there was nothing but silence.
You know, they got £50,000 out of the bank and they're clinging onto a hope of saving their daughter and their sister. I don't think they had a chance right from the start. I really don't. I don't think this man gave anybody a chance right from the start.
The chilling question remained, where was Leslie Whittle? For the whole duration of the ransom drama, from the moment she had been kidnapped, Neilson had been keeping her prisoner. The following morning, as an army of police combed Bathpool Park for clues, unbeknownst to them, Leslie Whittle was being held captive only 70 feet away, not in the woods, but underneath them, in the network of storm drain tunnels that ran under the park. In the labyrinth of Victorian-era tunnels, Neilson had created a living hell for Leslie. She was chained with her face entombed in a wire mask. Deep underground, no one could hear her cries for help. This morning, I'm going to ring Phil Maskery, who was the detective from Staffordshire Police who, unfortunately for him, found the body of Leslie Whittle down the tunnel in Bathpool Park. Oh, morning, Phil. My name's Jackie Malton, ex-detective from the Metropolitan Police. How are you this...
Jackie Malton, yeah.
Thank you. Phil, we're looking at the case of Leslie Whittle, and you were the officer I know that, sadly for you, found the body of Leslie down in the tunnel in Bathpool Park. Would you be prepared to speak with me about your involvement in the Leslie Whittle case, please?
Yes, of course I would.
Phil Maskery has agreed to meet me at Bathpool Park, the scene of the aborted ransom drop. Phil was one of the detectives who uncovered the pivotal role the tunnels played in Neilson's fatally flawed master plan. What's this place then, Phil?
Well, this was termed the glory hole during the inquiry. This is where the money should have been dropped. The two bolts had been taken off and left on the top here, and this had been pulled down, and the money was going to be dropped into the hole.
The idea in Neilson's mind was that Mr. Whittle would come along, drop the bag down the hole. Neilson was somewhere else where Leslie was, and a bit like a rat in a sewer, come and retrieve the money in the bag.
That's what we thought. We thought he probably, as soon as the money was dropped, he would come under the underground drainage system, take the money and take it back to where Leslie was, and then just hightail it.
He's like a rat in the sewers, isn't he?
Oh, yes, certainly is.
It's like scurrying along, little man, greedy, trying to grab the bag, and of course, poor Leslie's brother couldn't find it, the stress that he was under, signals weren't working, everything else. And it was aborted, wasn't it?
It was, unfortunately.
So you went down there?
I did.
All the way down to the bottom?
All the way down to the bottom.
It's not pleasant, is it?
No, it's not pleasant.
What did you find when you got down the bottom of this?
Well, there was a lot of junk. That's why it's nicknamed the glory hole, because the kids used to play around here and throw things down in there. And all of it was junk, except I could see a newish dymo tape gun and also a roll of elastoplast. Both those became significant in the inquiry because the dymo tape was matched by the Forensic Science Service to be the dymo tape that had actually made the messages that were left in the post box outside Kids Grove Post Office. The elastoplast was, it was a long strip of elastoplast all screwed up, and that had been cut off, and the Forensic Science Service actually matched it with the bit of elastoplast that went round the metal hawser that was round Leslie's neck. So there were two very significant finds.
So the deposit site, if you like, where Leslie Whittle was found, is that connected to this glory hole?
It is, yes. And I did shout that I was going to go further into the drain, but I was told, no, don't.
I wonder what he would have done once he got that money with Leslie Whittle. It doesn't kind of, how was he going to get her out? Was he going to hand her back to the family? There's a huge part of me that thinks he was never going to do that and just leave her to die.
I agree with him. I agree. I agree entirely. He was a witness that knew him very well. She'd been in his company for basically a couple of days. She could certainly identify him.
And the thing about Neilson, isn't it, that he doesn't like anybody thinking that they could recognise him. And in those post office murders, he shot them.
That's exactly right.
Greedy, self-obsessed, little man, a little runt.
Yeah.
just a horrible, evil, dark man, psychopath. Having learnt of the network of tunnels under Bathwell Park, Phil Maskery was tasked with scouting their many different entrances. During his search, he made a tragic discovery.
I could actually see a plastic bag and with a steel rope going across it. And also I could see what looked like a lady's dressing gown hung on one of the steps at the bottom. And when I climbed down to the second level, I passed an open shaft on the side that went off elsewhere. And I could see a tape recorder, a reporter's notebook, batteries, pens, envelopes, and they were just sitting in this little side shaft that I could see beyond going into another shaft. Being professional, I was thinking this could be a crime scene. Then I got down to the bottom platform, and there was Leslie. And I could see that there was a wire rope secured around her neck, 2 U-bolts and bolts that were securing it. There's no way could she get out. No way at all. The scene was horrific. I mean, there's no other way of describing it. It was absolutely horrific. I'm 70 foot underground, and here I've got a naked 17-year-old girl with a wire hose around her neck, hanging like, you know, and just like a side of meat. It was awful, absolutely awful. My professional mode just clicked in, and I thought, this is now a crime scene. I've got a job to do here. She was tethered like a dog. She must have been petrified. She's 70 foot down. It's cold, it's wet. There's no chance of her releasing herself. There's no chance of anybody else coming down to her because nobody knew that she was down there. So she must have been frightened, absolutely frightened.
Leslie's head was caged in a barbaric metal mask. The only time it was removed was to allow Leslie to make the tape recordings. Phil, I'm going to play you the tape of the ransom call made by Leslie Whittle.
Now, down to the M6 North to Junction 10, and on to the A454 towards Warsaw. Instructions are taped under the shelf of the telephone box. No need to worry, Mum, I'm okay. I've got a bit wet, but I'm quite dry now. I'm being treated very well. Okay?
So that was the instructions that Neilson told her to read for the ransom drop. And we hear her say, I'm okay. It's quite upsetting, isn't it?
It is, very upsetting. It goes through my mind frequently that she would have been in her early 60s now, probably married, children, and she was denied all that.
I think it's the hope that she had. And then you see what happened to her.
Yeah.
You saw it for real. I just found that really upsetting, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'd never heard that tape before, and I found that really upsetting. And to be honest, I was shocked at my own response because, well, it just got to me, the poor helplessness and hopelessness of that girl, because we know what happened to her. But when she gave that message, it's okay, Mum, everything's okay, Mum, you know, that she had hope. And this Black Panther was just a cruel, callous, ruthless, hateful man to do something like that. So the whole combination, I think, of that interview I found really tough. And it doesn't matter how long you've been a cop or how long you've been out of the police. You know, sometimes some cases just get you at the back of the throat, and that emotion just erupted inside of me. And like I say, I was surprised at my own response, but it was instantaneous. Neilson must have thought that the ransom was not going to take place and was obviously desperate for money. So he gave up, it appears, on that ransom demand and decided he would go back to something that he was familiar with, which was robbing. One of the most impressive responses I've had is investigating these crimes is that it's all proper, you know, detective work. Proper detective work, and they didn't have all the kind of, let's say, luxuries of technology, because they didn't. And it's about earning your place, walking the pavement, doing that solid, tenacious, hour upon hour, scratching your head, thinking, detective work. Two officers out on patrol had a gut feeling that the man outside was up to no good, so decided to stop him. I'm heading back to see journalist Andy Wright, who covered the dramatic climax to this story.
They stopped, pulled up, went down the window, asked to speak to him. He looked at them and they said, what have you got in your bag? And the next thing, they had a shotgun pointing at them. He demanded that one of them get out and get in the back of the car, and the other one was told to drive. They drove down the road, and they came to a fork in the road, a Y in the road. And the driver, very cleverly, jiggled the wheel from one side to the other and said, which way? And it was enough to put him off balance for his colleague in the back, who he tipped the wink through the mirror, just to grab the shotgun. The shotgun went off. Neilson opened the door and backed out to try and get some leverage, and both coppers started shouting. As luck would have it, they were right outside a fish and chip shop with a long queue of miners waiting for their fish and chips. One of them came straight away to the rescue and karate chopped Neilson in the neck. It was enough for the policeman to disarm him, and the rest of the miners piled in. You should have seen Neilson's face at the end of it. But they had their man. They handcuffed him to some railings outside the chip shop and radioed for colleagues to come and help.
And I understand you followed the case right through to the trial.
He spent long periods when he'd be asked a question and he'd just think. He was very quick, actually. He gave the impression of being slow, but he was actually very, very quick, because he was always, you realised afterwards that he was actually trying to anticipate what the next question was going to be, so that he wasn't incriminating himself.
Was there any occasion that you witnessed him that he became emotional or upset or showed any form of kind of emotion?
He cried in the dock. He cried when it was suggested that he had a daughter of similar age to Leslie, and he became a little bit emotional at that point.
Neilson would eventually be found guilty of the murder of Leslie Whittle, as well as 3 other victims. He would also be convicted of dozens of armed robberies, sentenced to life imprisonment. He would never be free to inflict harm on anyone again. Through my research, I've tracked down Bill Wrench, who was the police officer charged with the task of securing Neilson in custody. Hi, Bill. Jackie Malton here, ex-Scotland Yard detective. I understand you were the officer who dealt with Donald Neilson when he was in custody. Would you discuss this with me, please?
Hi, Jackie. Yes, I was one of a small number of uniformed officers charged with the duty of care of Donald Neilson whilst he was detained at Newcastle Police Station. I still have the handcuffs I used on him over a 3-day period that I guarded him. Be delighted to meet you.
And you would see the size of that cell. In that top left-hand corner there would have been a built-in toilet. On the right-hand side, there was actually a fixed bed where Neilson used to lie. There was nothing in there except a blanket. Obviously, the shoes were taken off, left outside, so he didn't have any clothing by which he could hang himself or cause any injury to himself.
How were the police officers tasked to watch him?
One officer would be sat beside me in the corridor on a chair looking into the cell. This door had to remain open all the time, so they had full visual sight of Neilson 24 hours a day. So the early turn, nights and so on would be watching him. One other officer would be behind the corridor gate, sat in another chair with the keys on the other side. So there were two officers here all the time.
I remember Bill checking a prisoner and coming down the cell block and opening the shutter, and the prisoner was the other side of the shutter and was pretending to hang themselves. I'll never forget that look. It was imprinted in my mind, and this shudder went down my back, and they were just playing a joke, but that really did scare me. And it's interesting, isn't it, Bill, that he almost goes into subservient, passive mode when he's now under arrest and in detention by the police, and yet he was that controlling, ruthless, cruel, callous killer.
Absolutely. He was very small, and to see him, you just wouldn't think that he was capable of such an horrendous crime.
And when you look at these cells, and I remember them, of course, same as you do, but this is luxury, actually, isn't it, compared to the conditions that he held Leslie Whittle in, that cold, dark, wet tunnel, naked, tethered like a dog.
Absolutely. Massive difference between the two.
Following a full psychological assessment, Neilson was sent to Strangeways Prison in Manchester. Can you describe what that was like, going to Strangeway Prison?
I have taken many prisoners to prison, but this one was different. On arrival at the airlock, the outside door, we were taken into the airlock and that door was closed. And I have never seen so many prison officers in that area. A good number of people were there, all wanted to see this chap. Obviously the publicity at the time. We then took him through the airlock into the yard. Normally when police officers go into a prison yard, you will see faces up at the cells and people will shout and boo and swear and so on. And we were used to that and we just ignore it. On this particular day, I noticed the silence. I could see faces up at the bars. We took him across to the reception block, handed over his property. Normally that's where we would end our journey. But in this particular day, there was a very, very tall prison officer. Must have been at least 7 foot, a very, very big, powerful man. And he asked, would we like to go with him? And so we did. We walked into a corridor, and he described the corridor as one of Murderer's Row. And he walked down the corridor, naming each prisoner on the way. And then he moved us on to an open cell door. And at that door, Neilson froze for some reason. He didn't say anything, and the prison officer just gently caught him by the back of his collar and gently lifted him off the floor, moved him a couple of paces inside the prison and just gently placed him back down again. And he said to Neilson, all of these murderers in this corridor have all broken down crying within 24 hours. And then he slightly raised his voice and said, and you're next. And a cold chill went down my back, and then, of course, the sound of that slamming door. It was something different than normal.
One thing that continues to intrigue me is what drove Neilson to commit these horrific crimes. I'm meeting with psychologist Dr. Julian Boone, a man who has spent his entire career working in prisons, interviewing dangerous men.
One of the main engines of this his entitlement and resentment against society was that he was teased both at school and in the army for his original name, Nappy, which he changed to Neilson by default. But that can have a scarring effect. It can make you resentful if it's on and on. And you can just imagine in the army how much fun they had at his expense with that. So, please be clear that that is absolutely no excuse whatsoever, but it may have been a contributing factor to help explain the behaviour.
So what takes a man to transition, if you like, from a kind of prolific burglary, 400 burglars, never been caught, so we know he's good at it, let's say. Yes. Now to armed robbery and to kill.
More money is the short answer. Greed, more money, and to get rewards. Once he's done it the first time to some post office, he thinks, all right, well, that MO worked, I'll do it again for the next one. Didn't care whether anybody got shot dead or not. That was completely immaterial to him, in my view, that Leslie Whittle was killed or that she had these horrific circumstances.
When he was interviewed by police, he tried to indicate in the interview that he was caring for her welfare. What does that indicate to you?
That he's a bloody liar, to be frank with you.
What personality disorder would you give Neilson on what you know and read about him?
I think the prominent one would have to be psychopathy, and that would be where I would start if I were doing an interview with him, to assess him for psychopathy as I was going, but be aware that what's going on behind his eyes is very different from what's coming out from his lips.
What I'd like to do, Julian, is play to you the tape of Neilson when he was interviewed in prison.
I mean, the public lost it, didn't they? I mean, it's so the papers. If they're calling the bank part, they want to have her out there from. As I see it, we've got two sides. Yes. I'm on one side. Yes. And you're on the other. Yes. Somebody is to blame for that girl's death. And I was the guy that wasn't true. What went wrong? Well, I mean, you say you were right. I know for a fact that I'm right. So what went wrong? Tell you what, quite what you said, I blame you.
That interview is absolutely shocking in the sense of projecting blame. It's all an externalisation process. There is no internalisation or accepting of any form of responsibility by Neilson, is there?
No, and the flippancy with which he's speaking to the officers is again indicative of psychopathy, and the complete and utter way he says things. If it had been the Pink Panther, we wouldn't have had half the copies, and all the public were loving it and all this sort of thing. Notoriety. Hence, he even had a model of a Black Panther in his possessions at home. He was loving every bit of the notoriety.
Do you feel that had the money taken place, the exchange, let's say, he would have returned Leslie to her family?
I don't know. Because of the business of being identified. Yes. And I don't think he ever intended to do that, keeping her alive so that if necessary he could get her to talk on tape so that he could keep the thing moving forward. But the inhumanity of the man is barely conceivable to the rest of us. But if you're psychopathic, you can't imagine how easy it is to not care.
This poor young girl who had her life before her to end in such a tragic, horrific, frightening. Yes. You know, it's a wonder she didn't die of fright, to be perfectly honest. What that kind of, man is, like Neilson, who shows no remorse, who said, I tried my best, it was all an accident. I didn't mean to kill her. I just took her for the money. I'll take the punishment for the kidnap, but no way did I murder her. And he did.
Yes, I'm entirely with you on that.
Thank you. You know, I was a serving police officer, I only had about 3 years' service when the Black Panther occurred, but I didn't know until I've revisited it and spoken to the police officers how evil this man was. You know, when people speak about him, what did he look like, Donald Neilson? What did Donald Neilson look like? And he said you wouldn't have given him a second glance in the street. And the only way that he could get that kind of pure horror was to dress all in black with a black balaclava. But as a man without any of that, he's described as completely insignificant. I am convinced in my own heart that he had no intention whatsoever of returning Leslie Whittle to her family. He was just a man who was a psychopath, narcissistic, greedy, horrible, horrible man. But I don't feel I have explored this case fully without seeing for myself the actual location where Neilson took Leslie Whittle.
That is it. That small opening opens out into something probably about 5.5 feet in diameter. It goes down in total for about 90 feet. And if you open that, you see a platform with pieces of metal in the set into the concrete which act as a ladder.
It's just chilling, isn't it? We're in a beautiful park. Beautiful park.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of this is this darkness, this horror, the innocuous drain cover, which revealed something terrible.
Yes, it did.
What does it feel like for you, Phil, to come back here?
Well, I must admit, the memories that it provokes in me are not happy ones, really. But you cope with it. It was nasty. It was a nasty situation, a nasty environment. But poor old Leslie, as a grown man, to be left down there in those circumstances, I would have been extremely afraid. For a 17-year-old girl, it's just, you can't even begin to think what she must have been feeling.
But this is where she died.
This is where she died.
And these flowers are deposited every year, aren't they?
On the 7th of March every year, there's a bouquet of flowers. Don't know who they're from.
Every year since she died?
44 years.
44 years somebody's brought these flowers?
Yep.
You don't know who that is?
No.
She's never forgotten, is she?
No.
And she's never forgotten by the family, she's not ever forgotten by you police officers?
No, she's not. Something like this just rocks your faith in human nature when, you know, an individual can take a 17-year-old girl down there, naked, and just tether her like a dog. It just doesn't bear thinking about.
And the fact that he had a daughter the same age himself.
I know.
And how he could compartmentalise and detach from his own family and do that to a child similar age to his daughter. I mean, I don't think I've ever come across a man as evil as Donald Neilson.
No.
Very sad. Shall we leave it in peace?
Yep.
Donald Neilson died in prison in 2011. He refused to ever express any remorse for his crimes. But it's not the memory of Neilson that I take away with me after reinvestigating this case. It's the memory of his victims, whom I hope may never be forgotten.